Primordus comes from the Latin term primordium, meaning the first to come, or metaphorically, a beginning. What's up guys, Cashin here with a brand new video, and today we're going to talk about Primordus, the very first Elder Dragon, or the first to come. So, the first thing that I want to talk about Primordus is that his resting place was in a cavern deep underground where the Asura made their home. Now the Asura, they chose this area because there was a high count of magical energy that they found, which is exactly why Primordus was sleeping there. When an Elder Dragon sleeps, they kind of emit this very high amount of energy, magical energy, because that's what they digest. That's their food source. That's how they become stronger. So, in a way, what ended up happening was the Asura were trying to mine for this magical energy, but what they were really finding was the essence of an Elder Dragon down below the depths of Tyria. And so, as they were doing their experiments, if you will, they ended up awakening Primordus. Now, his alarm clock was actually supposed to go off at 1078 AE. However, due to the death of the Great Destroyer, he ended up sleeping until 1120 AE. Now, the Great Destroyer was his right-hand man, if you will, what we call the Dragon's Champion. And in the first game, you end up killing the Great Destroyer, and because of that, Primordus goes back to sleep. Now, the big issue is that once Primordus awakens, he stirs the rest of the Elder Dragons, and they all start waking up and following suit like dominoes. And so once Primordus awoke, he began creating the first minions known as destroyers. And these destroyers just rampaged the depths of Tyria, just flooded them. And the first real victims that they had were the Asura. The Asura had to actually go up to the surface. They couldn't live there anymore because the destroyers just absolutely annihilated their homes, killed so many Asura, and it was just impossible to live there. Now, at this point in time, this is where the Deldrimor Dwarves come into play. Now, the Deldrimor Dwarves were miners, and their king, known as Jalis Ironhammer, invoked something called the Right of the Great Dwarf. He saw that the destroyers were awakening, and dwarves have been around. They're one of the most ancient races of this time, and so they were the only ones still around who remember the Elder Dragons. The dwarves were the only ones of the ancient races that survived past the last time Elder Dragons were around. However, there was also one other race called the Jotun that were there, but the Jotun are just dwindling by numbers. So after King Jalis decided to invoke the right of the Great Dwarf, or you could just call it the right, if you will, he turned his people into living stone with this hive mind mentality that rivals the same hive mind mentality that the destroyers have. And with this newly found army of stone dwarves, they entered the depths of Tyria, ensuring that none of the destroyers would make it up to the surface. Since that day, no other dwarf has been seen again. There's only been one that has been found, named Ogden Stonehealer, who was a companion in the first game, and he assists the Derman Priory. We will talk about the Derman Priory at another time, but essentially they are an army of scholars, if you will. They fight for knowledge of Tyria, and so Ogden Stonehealer, as a not only an ancient being, but as just someone who's been around for so long, he's very wise with a lot of information that the Priory could use. So, with all that said, Primordus still remains awake now in the depths of Tyria, still stirring. However, due to many other races having to go up to the surface, you are actually giving Primordus more room to grow. He's able to build up more destroyer armies and legions and just get ready for the time when he can actually overcome the dwarves and make it to the surface. Now, other than the Asura, there were other races that had to come up to the surface, also known as the Skrit and the Merlo, which we could talk about at another time. They were also forced out of their homes and onto the surface. Now, the only remaining depths dweller that still remains would be the Dredge, which are kind of like mole-like humanoids. However, even their minds, that's like their bread and butter right there. It's very close to the surface now. There's not a lot that is at the depths that's not already in the dragon's control. So, with all that said, we still have, to our knowledge, we really don't know what happened to the dwarves, but to our knowledge right now, the dwarves are still fighting down below in the depths of Tyria, fighting the destroyers. We don't know if they're still alive. We don't know if Primordus took them out. What we do know is that the destroyers are starting to seep through. They're trying to find they're actually finding ways to escape the depths and make it to Tyria, the surface of Tyria. So, one very interesting and final fact about Primordus and his champions versus the other Elder Dragons is the fact that they do not actually corrupt living beings. In fact, they take elements such as earth, stone, and fire and create their destroyers that way. Now, most other Elder Dragons and their champions prefer to take minions from take living beings and corrupt them into minions. However, with Primordus and his minions, they are actually created through earth and fire. However, they can actually corrupt. So the interesting thing about Primordus is that what makes him so feared and what makes him so horrible compared to the other Elder Dragons is that he really just kills pretty much for shits and giggles. I mean, he doesn't even corrupt them, he just kills them. And in a way, that is so much worse because he doesn't even utilize the bodies. He just leaves a wake of death and destruction wherever he goes. And he doesn't even corrupt the living beings. He just kills them off. Whereas the other Elder Dragons utilize them in their armies, he just sees them as inferior and kills them off. And then he just can keep creating more and more destroyers with the use of earth and fire. Which in this way, in my opinion, that makes Primordus absolutely the most dangerous and powerful Elder Dragon out of any of them. And the reason why is because there's earth everywhere. And there's one area where there's an entire volcano worth of fire to use. So it's never ending. A battle with Primordus is never ending because he could just keep building more and more up. Whereas if you kill off everyone on Tyria, other Elder Dragons, their issue would be they cannot find anyone else to corrupt. So at a certain point, they're dead in the water. But with Primordus, it's a never-ending constant progression. And to me, that's why Primordus is the most fearful dragon out of any of them. And it's also why Primordus needs to be the last dragon we fight. He was the first to arrive. He needs to be the last to kill. Because the longer that you let him stir, the more powerful he becomes. And the more powerful he becomes, the harder and more epic the final fight with Primordus will be. So overall, that is mainly the big points about Primordus. And by far one of my all-time favorite dragons, because he's really one of those things that bridge the first game with the second game, and there's not a lot of things like that, and he is an actual boss that does that. He's an actual in-game boss we will one day have to fight, that connects everything together. And to me, that story is going to be so much more powerful, because in my hope is that at some point the dwarves will have to come back to the surface and ask for help and work with the other races of Tyria to try and defeat Primordus. And to me, that is just this climatic fight for survival that I really want to feel. What's up, guys? Thank you so much for watching this episode. If you'd like to see any more from me, go ahead and click on that previous video. However, if you've already seen that and you want to see something else, try this other series that I played. As always, guys, thank you so much for just being there for me and for the channel, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate you. As always, guys, remember to spank that sexy subscribe button, and as always, be excellent to each other. Until next time.